The heat wave hit us like a wall, 112 degrees by noon, radiating off the pavement like steam off boiling water. You could feel it the second you opened the door, like the sun had wrapped its hands around your throat. It wasn't just uncomfortable, it was dangerous. And in the middle of it, while my wife was setting up wet towels on our dog to keep him cool, and our AC unit was barely holding up, I got the letter, hand-delivered by a smug sun hat-wearing HOA board member named Lisa. She stood there on my front porch in full makeup and heels, sweat-free somehow, and handed me an envelope like she was serving a lawsuit. "I'm afraid your porch modifications violate community standards," she said, shielding her eyes from the sun. "We've also received noise complaints and clutter citations. You've been warned multiple times. Unfortunately, the board has voted to begin the eviction process." I blinked at her, thinking maybe the heat was making me hallucinate. Eviction? In the middle of a record-breaking heat wave? I opened the letter, legal-looking, HOA letterhead, violation codes I'd never heard of. The final line punched me in the gut. "Your residency is scheduled to terminate within 5 business days." 5 days. In this heat. No time to find another place. No appeal process. Just get out. "Lisa," I said slowly, "we've lived here for 9 years. You can't just throw us out like this." "Oh, it's nothing personal," she said, smiling. "Rules are rules. Besides, the neighborhood is changing. We need more compliance." That's when I realized this wasn't about violations. It was about control. And they picked the worst possible week to start a war. We tried to keep calm. My wife was a wreck. The kids were confused, scared. I spent the next 48 hours calling everyone, county offices, lawyers, tenants' rights lines. No one seemed to have a solid answer. "HOAs have your own power," one legal aid guy told me. "It depends on your bylaws." I dug into the documents I signed nearly a decade ago. Pages of jargon, fine print, clauses that gave the board near total authority over property decisions. One clause, buried on page 42, gave them the right to issue emergency residency termination for violations of community standards, if those standards were linked to safety or harmony. Harmony? I walked outside and stared at my shaded porch. The one they claimed was non-compliant. It was a simple wooden overhang I built myself. It gave our front door shade, kept the house a little cooler. A few planters, a wind chime. That's what they were calling unsafe. But it wasn't the porch they wanted gone. It was me. I wasn't one of them. I didn't show up to HOA meetings in golf polos. I didn't vote their way. I didn't gossip. And worst of all, I had pushed back before. Once, when they tried to fine a disabled neighbor for leaving a mobility ramp installed too long, I helped him appeal, and he won. They never forgot that. Day 3 of the heat wave, and it hit 114. The AC coughed and wheezed, barely pushing out air. My wife sat in the living room with frozen bottles wrapped in towels on her lap. Our dog had stopped barking, just laid flat on the floor, tongue out. That's when the power went out. Blackout. Neighborhood-wide. Grid overload. And that's when I lost it. You want to evict me? In 114 degrees? During a blackout? While my family cooks inside and the HOA board drinks bottled water in an air-conditioned clubhouse? No, I wasn't going anywhere. I packed an overnight bag, grabbed bottled water. I knew I had one play left, and it was a risky one. I drove to the city zoning office. I waited 4 hours, sweat soaking through my shirt, until they finally called my number. The clerk looked at me like I was insane when I dropped the HOA eviction letter on the counter and asked, "Is this even legal?" She raised an eyebrow. "You got this during a heat wave." "Yep." She made a few calls, pulled out files, cross-checked property rights and HOA charters. And then she leaned in. "Sir, based on this clause," she pointed, "they may have overstepped. You own your property outright, and your structure was permitted. Emergency termination is supposed to involve actual danger, fire hazard, structural collapse, etc. Shade and a wind chime don't count. That was it. That was my opening. "Can I file an injunction?" I asked. "You can file a formal complaint," she said, printing out a form. "If it goes through, we can issue a stop on any enforcement action by the HOA." I left the office with that paper clutched in my hand like a lifeline. But I wasn't done yet. That night, I sat outside in the dark. Just me, a flashlight, and a battery-powered fan, and started writing my story, the full story. I posted it on our neighborhood social group. I shared pictures, my letter, the temperature that day, a photo of my wife asleep on the couch with damp towels over her arms. And I titled it, "My Family's Getting Evicted in a Heat Wave Because of Shade and a Wind Chime." It blew up overnight. Neighbors started messaging me privately. A few asked for more details. Some offered help. A few said they were sorry. But the one that mattered came from a man named Hal. Hal was a retired judge, lived 4 houses down, and he'd had his own battles with the HOA before. "I've seen abuse of power before," he wrote, "and this is abuse. I'll help you file." The next morning, the board called an emergency meeting. I showed up with Hal at my side. Lisa stood there, arms folded, tight-lipped, watching me like I was a fly she wanted to squash. "This is a closed session," she barked. "Not when the eviction is unlawful," Hal shot back. He dropped the printed code violations, zoning maps, and the formal complaint paperwork on the table. "You've opened the HOA up to liability," he said. "And if you follow through with this eviction during a state-declared heat emergency, you'll be personally named in the civil suit." The silence in that room was deafening. Lisa didn't speak. She just picked up her papers and walked out. When Lisa stormed out of that meeting, something shifted, not just in the room but in the entire community. The other board members sat silently, unsure if they should follow her or stay put. Some of them looked embarrassed. Others looked relieved. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. Hal had made it clear. The eviction was unlawful. The board was exposed, and if they pushed any further, they'd face real consequences. I walked out of that meeting with my head high, not because the war was over, but because the battle had finally turned. For the first time, the HOA wasn't in control. That evening, the heat still hovered around 100 degrees, but something had changed in the air. Neighbors I barely knew started waving at me. One couple even came by with cold drinks. They told me they'd seen my post, and that they'd also been threatened over minor infractions. The HOA had been running unchecked for too long. I just happened to be the first one who said, "Enough." I started gathering stories. It wasn't hard. One woman had been fined for excessive garden lighting. She had 2 solar lights in her flower bed. Another guy got hit with a $500 fine because his teenage son parked his pickup half an inch over the driveway line. The HOA had become a private empire, and Lisa was its queen. And now, the villagers were getting angry. Within a few days, I'd filed a full report with the City Housing Board. With Hal's help, we submitted every HOA abuse complaint we could gather, all properly formatted, dated, and backed up with photo evidence. He knew the system inside and out. He told me, if we can, stop them with emotion, we stop them with paper. Meanwhile, I put the finishing touches on something I'd been building behind the scenes. A full breakdown of how the HOA had misused funds over the last 2 years. See, what Lisa didn't know was that during COVID, I'd done part-time accounting work from home. I knew how to follow money, and I followed it right into a rabbit hole. Expenses for unnecessary landscaping that matched a company run by Lisa's cousin. Security cameras that were never installed, paid for in full. Even emergency maintenance line items that were oddly vague. By the time I was done, I had a 40-page PDF full of red flags, and I sent it to the HOA board. I also CC'd every homeowner in the community. The fallout was instant. The HOA message board, normally filled with boring announcements about trash pickup, lit up like a wildfire. People were furious, demanding explanations, asking for receipts. One homeowner even made t-shirts that said HOA Il Heatwave Oppression Association and passed them out at the next community gathering. Lisa didn't show her face for a week. When she finally did, it wasn't at the clubhouse, it was at my driveway. I'll never forget the look in her eyes. Rage, mixed with something else. Fear. "You think you've won?" she hissed, sunglasses hiding her eyes. "No," I said calmly. "I think we have. The whole neighborhood." She stepped forward like she was about to explode, but then stopped. She looked up at the new shade tarp I'd added to the front of my porch, the one they'd tried to fine me for. It flapped gently in the wind, casting a cool shadow over my rocking chair. And then, she walked away. But I wasn't done. See, I could have just celebrated the win. But something in me said, no, they need to feel it. They need to feel what it's like to sweat under pressure. So I filed a petition, backed by nearly 60 homeowners, to dissolve the HOA board and hold emergency elections. It passed. Lisa was removed as president, the treasurer resigned quietly, the secretary moved out within the month. And me? I was elected temporary interim chair until the new board was chosen. I didn't take the role to lead, I took it to clean house. Our first order of business? Reverse every fine issued during the heat wave, install a temperature-based emergency clause that prevents action against any homeowner during extreme weather events, and publicly disclose all spending from the last 5 years. It wasn't revenge, it was repair. A month later, the heat wave had finally passed. The power was stable again. People were back to walking dogs, watering lawns, and waving at each other like neighbors again. But my favorite moment came on a Sunday morning. I was sitting on my front porch with my wife and kids, coffee in hand, breeze blowing through the new wind chime that Lisa once claimed was a noise hazard. A couple walked by, new to the neighborhood. They waved, smiled. The woman asked, "Hey, are you the guy from the HOA story?" I laughed. "Yeah, that was me." She nodded. "We moved here because of you. We read the whole thread. You made this place livable again." And right then, I realized something. It wasn't just about surviving a heat wave. It wasn't even about beating the HOA. It was about showing people that when someone tries to use power to bully, control, or evict you, especially when you're at your weakest, you don't have to take it lying down. You stand up, you speak out, and sometimes, you win.